Alright, well thanks for coming today, guys. I would like this to be a kind of interactive conversation, so feel free to stop me and ask questions, especially if you've got any concerns about how it relates to what you do specifically. We've got plenty of time to kind of stop and start a little bit and still have questions at the end, so feel free. So you're in a client meeting and the client says, I've been reading an article in Advertising Age that said, American Express said that they were moving all their digital buying to programmatic. And what would you say? Can anyone describe programmatic buying in a few words, a few sentences at all?
Sounds problematic.
Alright, it does sound problematic, Chris. And we're an advertising agency, so clearly there's a lot of misunderstanding in general about what this is and what it means to us and our clients, so hopefully we can get into it a little bit more. Good news is, you're not alone. If you look at this data from eMarketer, it's basically saying that 23% of marketers, so they're asking marketing directors, VP of marketing, whatever, if they're using programmatic buying, 23% say they are, and if we read between the lines for the rest of them, unaware of it, so obviously they don't know anything about it. We've heard of it, but we don't have an understanding, so they don't know anything about it. We understand, but we're more than happy to apply, but we're not using it, they don't know anything about it, and 10% we understand it, we haven't used it yet, they don't know anything about it. So the majority of the industry is not really sure what it is, even though, as you'll see, when it comes to the volume of impressions that are being bought online, it does actually form the majority of buying and selling. So this is not Media 101, but I just want to kind of like talk a little bit about how we got to where we are in the digital world. The first banner ad was in 1994, when I believe that year the click-through rate was 44%. Yeah. So the click-through rate today.
That's an efficient buy.
The click-through. That's a good buy. The click-through rate today is what? Anyone?
0.002%.
It's about 0.07%.
Okay.
Yeah. So it varies by industry, but in general, I actually bought the first ever banner ad for my agency in, I believe, '96. We had no idea what we were doing. We just put it up on a website for chartered accountants or something. But it was very exciting at the time. Google was founded in '98, and then after that, everything kind of went nuts for a while. And if people that were in the industry back then, I'm looking at you, Jim, specifically, will remember that it was a pretty crazy time. There was all these .coms forming, and all the big agencies were taking their business on spec or equity-based or whatever. And a lot of people, when the tech crash happened in 2001, lost a lot of money, specifically agencies, big agencies. And they were very nervous about doing any kind of .com work after that. So there was companies starting that were .com based, and then the whole advertising thing was going on at the same time. And it just, after that, it took a while to kind of get going again. Then we started having different things like pop-up ads, networks forming, and so forth. And eventually and then social media ads in 2008. And then everyone talking about programmatic right now. Somewhere in the middle of this, when the networks started, it was really a way that you could stop having to go direct to publishers like New York Times or whomever and paying $10, $12, maybe, I don't know, $17 for someone like TripAdvisor, which is still a viable buy, but this was a way to collectively pull together a lot more sites and buy it more cheaply, basically. The problem is, at the beginning, you had absolutely zero transparency. You really didn't know where you were going. You could be on a lot of very suspect sites, especially at the beginning when so many impressions were on C-level sites. And it eventually got better. You were able to split your networks into A, B, and C level, and you got more control, you got more targeting, and so forth. Really, programmatic is taking that kind of to the next level. So just to describe it, programmatic is the process of buying media in an automated fashion through digital platforms. So these are, so you've got your data platforms and you've got your delivery platforms that allow you to kind of control it on a dashboard effectively. And really what it does is it takes away from the process that we've traditionally gone through, like we do for most media, is to put out an RFP, wait for responses, do our negotiation, argue over price, and so forth, and traffic and all that kind of stuff. It really kind of cuts that out altogether. That doesn't mean to say there's not viable buys out there beyond programmatic. Of course there are. But really this, well, we can talk a little bit more about the benefits, but that's essentially what it is. So it really is a kind of a way of buying directly. You've heard the term real-time bidding. And this is really, it's kind of like a stock market. It's a little bit like how pay-per-click works on Google. You're really kind of bidding for the audience that you want, and you may or may not get it depending on how much you're prepared to pay and so forth. So real-time bidding is programmatic all the time, but programmatic is not necessarily always real-time bidding, if that makes sense. So real-time bidding is a subset within that. For the purposes of your clients, I think it's just easier to talk about programmatic buying. They're not concerned necessarily how we're executing everything at the back end. So I'll just get into a little more detail. Is it important? Well, between 2014 and next year, it's going to double. So about 20 billion by next year will be spent on programmatic buying. I think digital collectively right now is about 50 billion, so it's a pretty big chunk, and it's a really big chunk of display advertising. 87% of buyers say that they're going to increase their programmatic buying more than 50% in the next 6 months. And in 1 second, you've got access to over 2 million impressions in countries all over the world, and over 1 million publishers. So it's really the whole internet that you have access to. And interestingly, one of the biggest things that advertisers that are using it, saying that they use it for, is that it's transparent. And we'll get into that a little bit more, because this is what really makes it very interesting in areas beyond just cost when we get into other disciplines and other channels. So if I had to lay out exactly what the main benefits are from programmatic buying, and I really want to stop in each one of these and talk about them a little bit, and I want you guys to understand what this would mean to your particular department. Now the first one is pretty obvious. So if you're talking about real-time bidding, we're going directly to publishers in some cases, not all publishers by any stretch, to networks and to exchanges, and negotiating directly. So the difference between a network buy and a programmatic buy could be quite spectacular. And if you've got a client that's direct response and everything revolves around how cheaply you can get them to do something, whether it's to go to their website or to sign up for their e-newsletter or to download a buyer's guide, then the difference between $4 and $1.50 is absolutely huge. So you're really making that you could double, triple the efficiency of your buy by buying it cheaply. Certainly that's not the only parameter here, but it really is very critical when you're dealing with something where the metrics can be laid out so clearly. The second big advantage though really is we're not giving up targeting to get this. In fact, we really have more targeting. There's a lot of data out there. Most of the programmatic platforms that you use, including the one that we use here at Evok, have a lot of third-party data, which is Nielsen and Axiom and all that kind of stuff, online as well as offline data from MasterCard and elsewhere, and research that they've done. And you combine that with primary data such as online behavior, search behavior, profiling your visitors to your client's website, collectively pulling that all together, and you're able to create targets that you can go after and bid after. Transparency, that was the one I talked about before. This is the thing that the clients like, because you can see every single site that you're going on. And what this means is it really takes it beyond just the media function. So, for example, we met with a client yesterday, Premier Care and Bathing, and they're aimed primarily at older boomers and seniors. But part of the research we did, including using our programmatic platform, was to look at the differences between different age groups within seniors. And it's very, very significant. So seniors are generally a little bit less online than the general population, but that's much less pronounced at 64 to 70 than it is 75 plus. There's big differences every 5 years in terms of their online behavior. So the way that they use online is quite different. They're much more liable to be on a tablet as opposed to a smartphone. Again, as they get older, that becomes more pronounced. But having said that, if they're affluent, so if they're earning 75 plus or they're college graduates, they're almost online as much as the rest of the population. So those little nuances are really a big deal in terms of how we target our messaging, how we target the platforms that we look at using, and so forth. And we're able to, at that point, really look at the efficiencies of each of our little segments in real time. So instead of having a buy that maybe goes out to a network, we wait for a few weeks to see how things are working, we get a report every month that we send to the client. This is all going on in real time, so we can very quickly see what's working and what's not working. A lot of clients like to do A/B testing. Our client Yussi is very much into that. We can do A, B, C, D testing in real time. We can change out the colors. Obviously, we can change out price points. We look at how that resonates between the different age groups that we're targeting and so forth. So it really starts to provide a lot of great data that that the creative guys can start to glean insights into what our consumers are doing and what's resonating with them. And as I say, part of that is real-time optimization. You're literally doing this in real time. There's different ways of doing it. You can kind of offload a lot of the mechanisms to your to your platform and allow it to do it. But you can be, or we can be, the media planners can be as involved as we want to be. And I think certainly at the beginning, as you're starting to build out campaigns, it's going to be really critical that you do that, and then you share that information with the account team and the creative guys, and what the implications could be from a messaging and a creative and all sorts of point of view. And that leads back into the control. So we can change out the creative, mid-campaign, mid-segment. We don't have to re-traffic. So we can set it up in such a way that we're able to change certain fields within the ads as we do it and as we see the results that are happening. So essentially how it works is, so you go to a website and then the site knows that you're there. The ad exchange finds out what's the advertisements that are available out there that are looking to advertise. Does their targeting match this particular user based on all the data that we have? And then just goes out to a bid. So there's multiple advertisers that want that eyeballs. They're there. They put in their bids, and whoever wins it. It's a little bit like kind of how hotels sell their rooms. At the end of the day, they want to sell directly. But if they're if they have a lot of inventory and it's getting close, and they want to sell it, they will then release those rooms to Hotwire or whatever. In the same way that publishers will release their impressions into the market to be taken up by exchanges. And then sold on this kind of bidding mechanism. And then the winning ad gets served. And all this happens in 1/10 of a second. It's very, very immediate. So this is our platform here at Evok. And I'm just using an example that we pulled from yesterday. So we can go in and say, okay, we're interested in seniors, but we're looking at ways to get the client more digital. How can we engage with their customers? Are there potential customers online? They question that as they're older and so forth. And we really have to boil that down into with what types of personalities do they have within that may be amiable to online advertising. So these guys are categorized as seniors that are adjusting to technology. And I can see there that our potential reach nationally is about 2.74 million people in the US that fit this target. So we can then start to build this out and think about how our messaging is going to work towards this particular target. We've got an approximate CPM there of $1.05. And then we can pull this into custom audiences, so we can then say, okay, I just want men within that group, I just want a geographic area, I want contextual on top of that, and we layer it all together until we get a specific audience, and then we put that together into a campaign. And what's interesting is, as I say, you'll see that how they're online is quite different. So we would look at the platforms and we can allocate our impressions to different types of, whether it's desktop or mobile or tablets. Or whatever, as well as social through Facebook Exchange. So right now, the way that we're using it is just through most forms of online. You can use display. As I mentioned, they've got Facebook Exchange, Twitter, I believe, is on board or coming on board pretty shortly. And so we can target people directly through those exchanges to their social platforms. Now we can also target social users and influencers regular online. So we can go after bloggers, people who've been pre-identified as being bloggers and frequent posters, and we can then target them when they're elsewhere online as well. So there are those targets. And then video, it's kind of the same as display, but often when we build a campaign, we'll see that the number of impressions available to bid against for video will be lower because not all sites can take video necessarily, and if they do, they're not necessarily putting it out for bid. And then obviously mobile. So we would look at our target audience, see how important mobile was to them, and we can adjust our delivery appropriately. So this is kind of the main thing that's going on with programmatic at the moment. Now, yeah, Chris?
Where does rich media fit in there?
Rich media would fit into video really. Okay. So yeah, we can run rich media, and again, it really kind of is dependent on how the sites can take it, just like it is now. The costs, of course, for rich media and video are generally a little bit higher on a CPM, but again, still much cheaper than how we would buy it if we weren't buying it programmatically. Now, what's interesting is that really, I think everyone remembers Minority Report, and we all talk about how Tom Cruise was walking and it says, "Hey Tom," or whatever his name was, and delivers an ad. Well, at the end of the day, it's all about big data. So everyone's collecting data. Facebook's collecting data, Google's collecting data, everybody, and everything's all linked. So your email address is linked to your credit card, which is linked to your IP address at home, which is linked to your phone, which is linked to your Facebook. And all these things, at the end of the day, this data can be collated. So what essentially is going to happen with programmatic is that it's going to really reach out to all media. So not just digital, not just digital mobile, but billboards, digital billboards, TV, radio. A very small number of advertisers are doing programmatic buying on TV now. So for example, instead of buying ratings that they that they negotiate, which has been the model for how long, Jim? Long time. They're going to say, just like they do online, they're going to say, I want a guy 25 to 54 who's interested in tech, who has an iPhone, and find that impression wherever it is on the television. So think about someone who's running through Central Park and she has an app that monitors performance, and she's seen over the last few weeks that she's plateaued out and she's not improving, and her app's telling her this. So she then goes and she searches for new running shoes on her phone on the way home. She gets ready for work. She gets in a taxi cab, and they've got video units in the cabs back to the seats in New York. She sees an ad for Reebok, and then she sees an ad on a digital billboard for Reebok. When she gets to work, she's got a notification on her Twitter feed, a sponsored message from Reebok to engage in a conversation, and then she buys that product. And the whole cycle goes round. So that's really kind of how it's going to be in the not too distant future, that they're able to follow you around in different media. It's a little scary perhaps, but the whole point is to have relevant messaging at the right time, to the right people, which is what we're trying to do at the end of the day. So
I don't have to write things down. They keep reminding me.
You won't have to remind yourself, because you'll get that Halloween costume on your Facebook feed. Yes. It's the next lady you were searching for yesterday.
Oh yes.
Stewart, this is based on bidding, some kind of really fast automated bidding, because I'm assuming when you say the bid manager, it's really software.
Right, of course.
So one question is, if I don't bid enough, or I don't allow enough in my budget to bid, I won't get my ad displayed.
Well, I mean, the system will tell you what you should be bidding at effectively. So, for example, I think it was $1.05 there for that particular senior segment. If I want to layer on male only, that would be maybe a 20% premium. If I want to layer on, an age within that, that's going to be a premium, and so forth. And it adds up, and it will kind of give you a price that's going to enable you to get enough impressions against it generally. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is supply and demand.
It's making it more competitive to get everybody wants this one-to-one. You want to reach a person, this person that fits your profile, your target profile. You want to reach them one-to-one. So everybody's going to be competing for that guy.
Yep.
And so there's a chance you might not get him on Sunday afternoon, but maybe Thursday at 3 a.m.
So twofold. You talk about how you're layering other things, which are really kind of refining who you're trying to go after.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like one of those things calling you direct mail. SIC. It's like adding an SIC code to direct mail, so you're narrowing in on your target. Will the system tell you, based on how narrow casting you get, how long it will take to reach your? You say I've got to have my client wants 1 million impressions.
Right.
So now as I'm starting to narrow, it goes, okay, well now you've narrowed it so far, it's going to take you 3 months to get 1 million impressions.
Clearly, if the further you narrow it down, the smaller your universe is going to become, to the point where if you're running a very small geo-target, then it kind of sets limitations on how you're going to be able to buy it. So if you're layering multiple demographic or psychographics on top of that, then you make it down to, you've only got a few thousand impressions, and it's not going to make it worthwhile buying that way, and you might be better looking at it contextually.
Do you foresee in the future, and maybe it is now, that first impression with someone through programmatic buying or RTV would be at a premium, and then the more times you're reaching the same person, it costs less and less and less? Because, I mean, how many times can I reach the same person where they're still serving up, I'm still getting the impression, but I mean, how many times do I need to see the Halloween costume before I find
Well,
out?
most of the time with the data, you kind of build it out and find, other kind of lookalike modeling. So often you will actually build that core demo out. So you will work out where they are contextually and advertise towards those sites as well. So you're not necessarily always honing it into a smaller and smaller universe. You're just using that as a way to, because you can add your audience, you can do an and or you can do a plus, which obviously once you have plus it starts to narrow it down. But you can layer on different types of more general layering on top of that to broaden it out. And then of course you're looking within it, because you're optimizing all the time anyway, you may find that you can optimize against a broader audience within a certain contextual that gets you the same results.
Okay. If no one else, I have another quick question. The thing said, you showed the first graph and you were talking about how very few people know about this or are implementing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then later on you said it's gonna double by next year. So isn't that a great opportunity for us as an agency to know that we have clients who want to spend in this realm,
Of course.
but are uneducated about it and they
Of course.
need your counsel right now? It just seems like it's a big jump.
Most of it has been driven by the big advertisers. So you've got someone like American Express, who's the 9th biggest advertiser in the country online, or whatever. That's obviously going to skew the numbers, and if it says that 60% of all impressions are being bought programmatically, it's an 80-20 rule. It's by it's by a smaller number of really large advertisers. I think one of the concerns that I had last year when I first really started getting more into it was the fact that how can it work for smaller advertisers? Is it really just for the big national advertisers? And it's not at all. It's just that they were the ones that were kind of leading the charge in terms of how they were doing it. They had all their metrics in place, and they knew how to, they knew what they were prepared to bid at. But it definitely works well, and it works for business to business as well. So you can, we were looking earlier this week or last week at looking for small to medium-sized law practices, layer in family law within that, and all of a sudden you've got a really, really tight B2B target as well that you're able to create yourself. You're not relying on your vendors, your networks to try and create these for you. You're able to really work with your team, I think, better to pull this together ourselves.
Question?
Chris?
When you had done your original searches and it kind of looked more at a demographic model, but with all disruptive technology kind of layering on top of itself and platforms kind of going away and just it being available, is there anything in behavioral targeting that you see forecasting down the line that is going to be more robust than the current model they have now? Is there any trends or anything that you see coming down the
You mean, well, I mean, obviously, mobile is about a third of digital spend at the moment, and that's going to be closer to half in a few years. That's just going to be an ongoing trend, obviously. I think it's important to, I think it's easy to say we need to have a mobile campaign, but it's also important to understand how much of your dollar should be spent against mobile. It's not good enough to say, well, maybe we'll just deliver it naturally how the impressions are being delivered, but at the end of the day, your metrics on mobile are quite different from your desktop metrics and for your pad metrics for that matter. And this allows us to really kind of see how those are trending and what's happening within each in terms of your engagement rates and so forth, and then adjust it accordingly.
And like the media servers, like most people have ditched cable or are starting to ditch cable, and even the way that you kind of interact with like a Netflix or Hulu, the buying for that it seems to be changing. So I just
you can buy programmatically towards smart TVs. So in a very similar kind of way that you're buying online, it's just another platform.
And I think the beginning of that too is seeing them starting to pull social into that too, because you're not only just advertising to someone on Facebook, you're advertising to a certain person, and you may happen to capture that impression on Facebook or on Twitter as they start to pull those in. So that kind of, as you referenced, is moving away from specific platforms, but just capturing that impression that you're looking for, that demographic, wherever they happen to be at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point. I think this even more makes the point that you have to have your campaigns integrated, because there's no point in media putting together a programmatic buy that incorporates social without the social media strategy. So I think it's going to naturally bring that function closer together.
If you look at Hulu's doing that thing, and if everybody noticed this, that you can actually choose the ad experience you want in between your things, and that is weird. How does that work? You can pick which commercial you want.
Right.
right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it relates back to content, because people are going to choose the content that they're most interested in. So that really goes back to your messaging and you know, your creative and all those kind of things that we can see, and again, in real time. I mean, what's really makes it interesting is this is not a media conversation. When Chris talked the other week from the Raymond Agency about, you know, creating content, really this is a way of delivering that content, and it's a way of making sure that we are doing it, you know, to the right people, and learning the whole time as we go along, and how it's resonating with our consumers. Yes, sir.
Stewart, given the efficiency, given the targeting ability, the more relevant messaging, and the optimization, what situations wouldn't make sense for programmatic buying?
Well, I mean, there's certain situations where you know, you've got a certain amount of budget and you've got a very specific target that you can get, you know, you can deliver very well through a network buy or some other type of buy that really doesn't, you know, justify the time and the resource that would go into monitoring and this level of detail.
Like a general market awareness.
Yeah, so doing a general market awareness, and you're not really tracking the metrics as much, then you know you could suggest that we wouldn't invest as much of the resource to be looking at the optimization within that, or we're doing you know, different types of more custom creative units where we want to work with publishers directly to do like takeovers, any kind of scenarios like that. And there's certain audiences out there that are going to be more difficult to create at the moment through a programmatic platform that I can get from different types of vendors that can still do that. So it's even American Express backed down on that statement they made last year. At some point in 2014, we're looking to go 100% programmatic, but they kind of backtracked and said, well, really we're looking to increase it and get to a point where we're close to that. But there's going to be cases where it might not be applicable.